And we are live. Good morning, good evening. This is another community update by Saleor. And today I'm joined by my colleagues, Paweł Grylak, who's a lead designer at Saleor's team. Hi, Paweł.
Hello, hi everyone.
Dominik Żegleń, who's a senior React.js developer.
Hi, everyone.
And Krzysztof Wolski, who is a solutions architect at a research and development team. Hey, Krzysztof.
Hello.
So this is community update for December, and the goal for those meetings is to share with you what we are working on, what are the plans for the Saleor team, and also to meet you, and so you could meet us and see the people behind the work is being done in Saleor. Today we want to talk about the design, and the main topic would be how we want to standardize the design across all the work that's being done in Saleor. So let's maybe start, Paweł, with you. We have a new project, which is called Macaw UI, and you led this project. The idea is to standardize the UI across all the applications. So the first step is to make it internally for our applications, like the dashboard and potentially everything that's being connected to the Saleor API. And then eventually we want to make it so external people can also use it to help make those UI build faster. And I wanted to ask you, how did it start, and what's the plan?
Yeah, so Macaw UI start was basically that we figured out that we have some inconsistencies in our UI, and we decided that we will change some things and actually make it a bit easier to use. So we started with preparing the components that are the basis of everything that we have in the system, right? So the inputs, buttons, etc., etc. And from a designer's perspective, it was basically to have the usability and the user experience as good as we can. And from a perspective of Dominik, which he can probably agree with me, is to not have to build each component every time from the start, from the scratch, but we can reuse those components, and obviously as our developers can basically reuse those components, then the external teams who will at some point start doing the apps that will enhance Saleor will be using those same components to make sure that they have the experience throughout the whole system, the same for every user which uses the app, basically. Yeah.
So at this stage, this is just the beginning, from what I understood. We have what's the current stage? We have what parts is there, and do you think people can start playing with Macaw UI?
From a design perspective, so we basically have most of the things in common. We have those things done. We have those things prepared. If I can share my screen, I basically can give you a quick look of how it looks like. So we have as you can see here, the inputs, the different types of inputs done, the select models, basically everything that consists of a standard UI, the selectors, etc., and some major components like navigation, for example, and we have defined how the elements shall behave, right? So we have, for example, the autocompletes. We have, if you can see the comments here, this is basically me working with the developers of what we can do from the perspective of how those things can behave, and we have this kinds of documentation of how each of the elements will behave, right? So from that perspective, we have that done. As basically every design system is still growing, and we will be making changes to those things as it will evolve, right? We hopefully make as small changes as it can get, because it's not ideal to change major things while doing that. But from a perspective of design, it's still growing. We have the basics in place. And from developers' perspective, Dominik, maybe you can tell us about that a bit more.
Yeah, I was.
From the which perspective of implementing it in the Macaw or implementing in the actual project, like the dashboard or Saleor app?
We could start, for example, from the how did you, what was the process of translating these designs into React.js components, and is it difficult, and how you tackle this challenge?
So the workflow is that the Pavel draws everything in Figma.
Hmm.
Then after everything is done and it is consistent within itself, then I get the link to the Figma page. Um, I go through it, trying to think if everything is okay before I even implement it, or try to see some difficulties in implementing it, and if necessary, go back to Pavel and say, hey, there's a problem with it because the technology of our age is limited and some things would take lots of time for minor things, and what can we do about it? Then we talk, we negotiate, sometimes we fight, sometimes we not. And then we go to the actual implementation of it in the Macaw UI. So we're using React, and the main tool we're using it to develop those components is the Storybook.
Could you share maybe your screen and show us how it looks like, and maybe we could tell a little bit before we dive into MacawUI. What is Storybook for those who don't know?
So if we go to the Storybook's main page, uh, we get to know that it's a tool for building UI components and pages in isolation. So it basically means that we can build a component with mm, various various props without having to mount it into actual projects. So
So it's just faster to test them and to see how they look, right?
yeah, exactly. So uh, we can build a page in Storybook that looks like this, and we get to know how does the component look in all of the states, all of those colors, variants. Uh, we don't have to mount it in some page in our project like the Saleor dashboard
Hmm.
on the homepage and then work on it. We get to skip many layers of software like the authentication, like the API. We don't need it here. We just get the component props and we get the Storybook page. It really helps us to rapidly build components because it works almost instantly. I just change the color and bam, it's here. And I get to see all of those components with the changed colors. Oh, right. So inputs and buttons have changed. I don't need to uh, find uh, all those components within various pages, within various parts of the Saleor dashboard. Then I just have to look at the Storybook. I have everything in one place, and ta-da, it's magic.
So when you work with Pavel, you implement that. So you show those elements, those pieces of UI using a storybook. And could you describe how it works when there is some feedback from Pavel? Do you often happen to have some differences in the design, and how you resolve that?
We do, of course, we do have some differences between actual implementation and the design. mostly because of me, because I'm blind. And thank you, Pavel, for being my eyes for all those times. Uh, uh, we are using Chromatic here to we let's go back a step. We use the storybook deployments and the Chromatic, which are
What is Storybook
able
deployments?
to. Could you repeat?
Could you describe Storybook deployments? How does it work?
So there's a GitHub action which deploys the storybook after each commit to the within the pull request. Does it make sense?
Mhm.
So uh, I just sent the link to this storybook deployment to Pavel. He looks at it and points all of those things I've missed or uh, just left out for for a reason and forgot to mention it why I did it, because I should ask that question before I do it. But we are humans and this is software development. Um, yeah, and the storybook deployment is one thing, and the second is the Chromatic. And the Chromatic is basically comparing the changes between um, base storybook and the storybook deployed built from the pull request, and we get to compare changes visually. One, and original on the left, uh, changes on the right marked by the green color. So there's a pull request that had changed the letter spacing. Uh, so it's a really subtle change,
Mhm.
and we get to know all of those places that were changed and how they look now. So even if I missed it, like uh,
Manual, you mean, by looking at the.
or by looking at it,
Mhm.
the Chromatic will tell me, hey, it has changed. Is it okay that it's changed? Um, and it even marks as green color what has changed. So it's really, really cool. Even if the DOM hasn't changed, the CSS is changed, and
I
we're
see.
notified about it.
So MacawUI is built on top of Material UI, right? Could
Yep.
you could you describe how someone could use this if someone decides to play with our library? What would be the first step, and how to integrate that, or how to test those components in an actual React.js application?
Okay, so the flow would be obviously create React app, npm install Material UI, npm install Macaw UI, because underneath the actually from the since the npm in the version 7, I think, you don't have to install Material UI manually because it's a pure dependency. So npm should install it
And then
automatically.
and then you
Yeah.
can just specify which team to use, right? Like with the team provider.
Actually, you don't have to,
Mhm.
because the Macaw has two themes, light one and dark one, and it's hidden beneath the uh, theme provider. So you can, of course, specify that by default you'd like to use a dark one, but you don't need to specify it in any place, and it just works with the light one, and you get the hook to change to the dark one.
Do you think that the current, so how many components we have in MacawUI, and is it possible to build an application right now, or would you rather wait till we add more of them?
I'm not sure how many of them are right now. I haven't counted them yet. I should. No, it's not. It's not ready yet. So we're missing some parts like the select components, the autocomplete components, date pickers. Uh, what we have right now is basic components like the radius, checkboxes, lists, buttons. So you might, if you use MacawUI, you might have to use some components directly from the Material UI or even build it by yourself. Yeah, we're working on it, but we're still missing some parts.
Because I imagine there is like a lot of work, because you also work on integrating those components into Saleor dashboard, right? And then you extract. So could you maybe describe, or maybe we could together, also with you, Pavel, describe what's the exact process and why maybe it takes much time than expected, that we need to start, integrate those changes first in the dashboard, and then when we are ready, that we feel that we are ready, we can then share it with the community. Maybe we could shed some light on this.
So it takes some time, mostly because even though we are using Macaw in the dashboard, it's at this moment it's only a few components that we're importing from there, and the rest is built directly in the Saleor dashboard. So we have to go through all of those places and replace the components with the Macaw's one. The next, I don't know, the new redesign would be much easier because we will be already using Macaw UI. So in the in the best case, it would be just bumping a version in the package.json and it would just work, but it's a real world. It never works that way. But the effort that we had to put into upgrading to the newest design would be much smaller than we have to do right now.
So we could say that this is a very important part, because we need to generalize those components across our internal infrastructure.
Yeah.
Then we will be ready to share that with the community. And I wanted to ask you, Pavel, because right now we are sharing those components, those pieces of UI as React.js components. But we also plan maybe at some point in the future to share the actual designs as a Figma file.
Yes. We at some point we will, as soon as we have everything settled down that we are agreed upon, and everything is in the dashboard itself, and we actually know that everything works well, it will be well tested. We will also support that files to anyone who will want to build a app or something that is like a bigger app that needs some designers to actually work through it. So they will have the access to everything that is in our system, in our design system, to make sure that they will create an app that will work as intended in our Saleor Commerce dashboard. So I think that will be really helpful for anyone who will want to integrate in our system.
So maybe you could focus a little bit more on that. So right now we have probably two ways, or just one way, which is MacawUI, the React.js components. In the future, we will maybe share the Figma files, but those two ways will help external people make applications faster and easier, because they will be easily available and consistent. The look will be consistent with what we already have in the dashboard.
Yes, exactly. That when they will be using our basically, because what we will share is a library of components. So if they want to choose states or want to have like specific, just to show their own developers that if they click this button, this is what will show up, and they will have access to all those states of how those elements will be reacting basically to user interacting with it, right? So they will definitely, it will be easier to implement that from a perspective that we'll be using components that are already available. And from the other perspective, they will be given a chance to focus on the user experience and not thinking about how the visuals actually look, to kind of mimic what we have in the system. So they will basically focus on the usability and the flows of the app, rather than focusing of how it's supposed to look, and to make sure that the experience is consistent, because it will be, and the Macaw UI and the Figma files will be the ones that will assure that.
Gotcha. So just before we go any further, we have a lot of questions on the chat, so we will respond to that in a minute. I also wanted to ask you, because there are some questions about the state of Saleor 3.0 release. And could you share, we already seen that it takes a lot of work to integrate all this stuff. And I was wondering, could we share a little bit more about the state of version 3 and the dashboard redesign?
And we have, from a perspective of redesign, we have first views of it. It's going, I think, rather well. It obviously won't be the Macaw UI as it is intended. At first, it will be a little bit of a mid-step between what we will have as a finished product and what we will have in the next implementation. But it's going on a good note and in a good direction from a perspective of the redesign.
And could we maybe tell our viewers a little bit more about the problems, or like what are currently the biggest obstacles that we face with the redesign? Or
Dominic, from a
or is it
perspective
just
of a designer, from my perspective, everything's a-okay. From a perspective of developer, that's a different question, probably.
Yeah. So there's a design and there's a real world. And
because you, Dominic, you mentioned that it sometimes takes, if you have like just a simple input, just to cover simple like a variety of state changes, it takes a lot of time to integrate that. And I was wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about different cases.
yeah, so there are lots of problems. For example, the small changes, small visual things, fancy things, almost always are very, very hard to achieve with I don't know, the simple way. So without writing a spaghetti code somewhere, we just have to think a lot how to do it. And that sometimes we just talk to each other with Pavel, and I say that, hey, it's going to take a lot of time and I don't think it's worth it. And Pavel is like, okay, it's not a problem. It is just a really major thing, a really minor thing to do. So we can get without, we can do without it. There's a problem with the scale of the project, especially dashboard. There's lots, lots of views that you have to cover. So even though we do something in Macau, and we change something, we should be checking the all of those views we are in there that are using this component.
Hmm.
And some of them, for various reasons, are just broken, and you have to dive in and think separately uh, about
Each
all
case,
those, yeah, each
it takes
case,
time. Hmm.
really lots of time. And it's mostly uh, minor things, but the minor things are what they actually, um, you know, we are angry at when we see them, um, because the text is misaligned by 3 pixels, and so some people can just stand it and they totally get them, because why would it be misaligned? So yeah, the scale and the basic code. Each code base has some uh, the basic code, and this is what uh, track us within during the implementing the new design. Uh, some components are done twice because they were doing the two different things, but somewhere along the way in the software development, they were merged into one, but nobody saw it, and now we have two same looking things, but changing the one wouldn't change the other. So again, we have to go through the Figma and through the storybook and check it one by one if everything is correct, if everything aligns.
Hmm.
But problems, most of them are solved just uh, by having some time to work on it and see what has changed. Some of the problems require some thinking. I like them more because I usually ask Pavel to see if something is okay or not, and he's sometimes angry at me that I misaligned something 2 pixels to the right or the left, or the letter spacing is wrong.
Yeah, that's my pet peeve actually. Yeah, I always check the letter spacings. But
Yeah,
this is
we had
also
lots of
like
problems with the letter spacing.
from other perspective, we also have some components that are not like typical components that are used in all of the systems. We have, for example, an alert state for an input, which is not something
Hmm.
that is common, right?
Hmm.
We basically, the states are active, focused, hovered, and error. We have the alert, which is basically an input that tells you, well, it's maybe not the best if you would do that, but we will allow you to do it because
Hmm.
it's, like, for example, a part of your model, business model in your e-commerce, right?
This
So we have,
increases complexity as well of the
yeah,
design,
it's
right? And then,
definitely increases the complexity of what we have to achieve via creating those components. And well, for example, some libraries wouldn't support that from the beginning, right? But we,
Mhm.
so Dominic has to do the additional work to actually make sure that some states will happen when they are supposed to. So that's from my perspective, that's something that also is a thing that gives additional work to actually make sure that the dashboard looks and behaves as it should.
Absolutely. And I think just a passing thought, but it seems UI is always very important, but in the e-commerce context, it's crucial, we could say, because it translates to how well you can sell things, and so that's like
Yeah,
from the design perspective.
in this case, and in the case of our system, and basically everyone who works with Saleor, the interface is important from both sides, right? So you have the customer side that actually buys the things,
Mhm.
and this is the place that can generate your revenue. But from our perspective, from the back office, when you're designing that, the sale is the part where the customer journey ends, right? But
Mhm.
there is the journey that happens for the back office, where they're supposed to fulfill the items, ship them, take payments, etc. And it's also important for us to make sure that our customers, our users, have their journey, have their experience as good as they can, and make sure that the job is well done. And it's easy to do, and it's easy to do, so they don't have to look through dozens of different pages to actually make sure that the shipment arrives on time, right? So I think that, as you've said, e-commerce is interface is important in e-commerce, but from both perspectives, from the customer's perspective and from the ones that's supplying it.
And then when the Macaw UI is ready, I think it will even further improve how easy it will be to create additional apps on top of Saleor, because this part will be already covered for you as an integrator.
Exactly.
Definitely.
So let's maybe check some questions, because time goes fast. Let's maybe check some questions. So there's a question about Storefront. Maybe we could address it. There is a question about, when you get a chance, regarding React Storefront, will it be a complete storefront that includes checkout? So that's, I think, question to you, Krzysztof.
Yes. So that's true. The React Storefront will be the complete storefront, but still we treat it somehow as a starter pack for developers. So we assume that somebody using React Storefront will pay some attention to adjust styles or change the design of the storefront to make it suitable for his application. Right now, the storefront is, I would say, complete, in meaning that you can create orders using Stripe payment gateway. And in the future, we are aiming to add additional payment methods, like support for Apple Pay, 3D Secure, and things like that.
I'm showing right now the GitHub page of React Storefront. So if you're interested, give us a star. I think we should also mention that we are currently moving our focus on this React Storefront, and that the old React Storefront in the future won't be getting that much support as before, right? And the focus is shifting towards this one.
Exactly. We are focusing right now to make React Storefront to ensure feature parity with old storefront. And I think that first quarter of next year will be the time when we'll announce it as official, fully complete project.
Maybe we could also tell a little bit about our stack in the React Storefront and the objective, because we want to create a very modern storefront using React. So maybe we could just enumerate what we are using. So we are using Next.js because we think it's one of the best ways to create React.js applications right now. We are using React.js, of course, and there is Apollo client, and everything is written in TypeScript. Have I forgotten about something? I think there is also a code generator.
Main point.
Sorry?
Right. I think that's our stars of our stack. And like you said, code generator is one of the most important tools there, which allow us to easily use our API and ensure type safety in the whole project.
And there is also an interesting decision we made regarding the design, and maybe we could talk about it together, because we decided to use Tailwind CSS. And the idea is that we won't allow people to be very flexible when it comes to creating a storefront. So we want to give more power to people, more flexibility. And at the same time, maybe in the future, we will also work on standardizing certain elements, as we are doing with Macaw UI for the internal applications.
That's right, Tailwind. At first, I was a little bit skeptical towards Tailwind UI, but when I had opportunity to play with it more, it occurred to me that that's the very quick way to create new designs, new storefronts. and it plays well with in this project. I am really happy how it went. And also one of the big pros of that using Tailwind is that it's easy to swap out. We are not, we don't have complicated Babel and Webpack configurations to ensure our package library is working well. If you want to use, for example, Material UI or something else, then it's easy to just cut out the Tailwind part.
And we also had this idea, maybe we could talk a little about this, that when you have GraphQL, a Saleor being a GraphQL endpoint, you have a lot of, you can easily change your views because you can adapt your queries, and this way you can display exactly what you want. And we want to focus on that in this new storefront, so that eventually you could create any type of e-commerce experience. So there's another, like a follow-up question from the same person, a time frame when we plan to make it stable.
So the date is not written in stone, but I think that early next year. At the moment, we are finishing multi-channel implementation in Storefront and working also on translations, which are two big and complicated things which touch practically every component in the project. So when we figure it out, then we'll be working more on adding additional payment methods. But early next year, I think it's a good time.
I think it's worth mentioning that those two features you mentioned are pretty complicated, and once we have them, we will be able to move, I think, faster from that point with other things.
Exactly. We are treating this project as a starter kit for other projects, and every bigger e-commerce would like to have translations and be able to sell to different channels, different regions. So these are quite crucial things for every e-commerce.
So there's another question, and I think we partially responded to that. So we don't plan moving from Tailwind, right? But at the same time, we think about the UI, about the CSS layer as a very thin layer. And we hope that people will be changing that. We don't want to force you to use anything. We want to just be more working on this layer below, so that you can easily adapt using GraphQL and Saleor API your storefront, so that it's responds to your use case.
I would like to add that MacawUI will play nicely if you are trying to create Saleor app. If you use the MacawUI, you'll be sure that the widgets you are using will be the same as the rest of the dashboard, which will be a nicer experience for the user.
Maybe we should clarify what is Saleor app. Could we define that? But because I think it sounds like a app for Saleor, but it's something different for us, right?
Right. So we have a concept of Saleor apps, which are external services which could be deployed anywhere. And those services are communicated with Saleor with GraphQL API and webhooks. So you could create, for example, application which will notify you over Slack that there's new order, for example. And you can create additional tools for the translators or additional synchronization with warehouses. These applications allow you to create some part of extend features of Saleor without modifying the code base, and you'll be more safe during the version upgrades.
Absolutely. Krzysztof, I wanted to also maybe share with our audience a little bit the code and describe what happens. So if someone is interested in contributing to React Storefront, it would be easier for them to do that. So once again, if you go to Saleor React Storefront, you will see the code, and I have it open right here. And one of the things
live. live environments in the README, so you don't need to even clone the repository.
Exactly, that's a good point. So you can, for example, see the live demo, but you can also run the application in a code sandbox. And I must say, when I first saw it, I was pretty surprised that it works that well. So this is exactly the code that we have on GitHub, and after a while, it starts in this code sandbox, like a full storefront, which is kind of interesting.
Now I'm scared. We are entering the live demo territory.
Yeah, I don't know what
we
happens
all
here.
know how live demo will go.
These are errors, I think. But it worked before. No, it works. It works. I think this is some more like warnings. Yeah, so it's kind of amazing that, after a few seconds, you can have a storefront. And you can, for example, let's try add something here to the cart. It seems a little bit slower than when you run it locally, but maybe that's just an impression. Yeah. So you don't have to install anything. You can run this directly in a browser, and it works. But you can also run it through from VS Code or any other editor. And there are a few things I wanted to maybe show quickly, because we already the time is running fast. But we decided for the GraphQL, we decided about this very specific thing where we splitted each query into a separate file, right? So you have everything in a separate file, and then you can reference those queries in your components. And I must say this is a very productive way of working. And then we also, the content of each query, the thing we want to return, we describe them using fragments, which are also separated. And then we can use those this information, the fragments, as types in TypeScript, which is also very handy. And you, Krzysztof, you found this plugin called GraphQL for VS Code, which allows us to jump between those pieces of GraphQL. So, for example, if I'm here in the product by Slack query, I can just do a command click, and it jumps directly to the product details fragment. And then I can just quickly jump between them, which is a very nice developer experience, I would say. And on top of that, we are using CodeGen, which is that all those queries are not only queries, all those statements, operations, GraphQL operations, which is queries and mutations, are automatically translated into hooks that are available in our components. So, for example, in product collection, we have this use product collection query, which corresponds directly to this product collection GraphQL file. So yeah, I find it pretty easy to navigate through that code. Is it the same for you, Krzysztof, or is it just me?
Exactly, that was my main reason why I switched from Python to TypeScript, because I can have fully typed GraphQL clients. And like you said, we have auto-generated hooks with typed variables, for example. So if you change your query, your TypeScript compiler already knows that.
That's very cool.
Shouts at you.
I like that a lot, yeah. I think the people who created CodeGen, the Guild, it's a very amazing tool. I'm really like using it. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it about the storefront. It's pretty easy to contribute. Feel free to check it on GitHub. And I also wanted to say that we are thinking about, so the idea is to be very modern, to have a stack which is modern and production grade. So we are planning to add more interesting stuff in the near future. And I think recently React 18 was announced as a release candidate, and we'll be looking into that. And I know that you, Krzysztof, you looked into Hydrogen, right, from Shopify, and they use server components in React, and we are also looking into that. So maybe at some point we will integrate that into React Storefront from Saleor.
Yes, we are definitely looking at other frameworks like Svelte, for example, or Remix, and not every tool will be incorporated into this repository. Sometimes we're creating PR branches just to test some new idea and get answers if that tool is very cool or not.
Yeah, we are very open about our process, so we just want to share as much as we can to respond to the needs of our clients and people who use this the best way. So if you have any feedback, let us know. We will be testing a lot of different things, I think, in the future. And you mentioned Svelte. We had the question about that from the community. So before those community updates, we ask about the questions that you would like to ask. And one of the questions was why we didn't use Svelte for Storefront. Would you like to take it, Christoph? Or
I'm also angry because I also wanted to use Svelte. Just kidding. I mean, I'm a big fan of Svelte. I follow this project because I like the idea of having more time, more things done during the build time and ship only minimal code. So it looks very promising technology. But for this project, we choose Next.js and React because those projects are more stable, and we have more know-how about those technologies and stack, and also the packages we choose are the same packages we use in our different repositories. So we are using probably most popular stack right now.
Yeah,
it's also easier to find developers
exactly
knowing React, and Svelte is a little bit underdog right now, but I'm sure it will change in the future.
So the reasons are practical.
If there's anybody who tried to create some maybe storefront for Saleor, I'm really interested in, and please share.
Yeah, we'll be looking into that as well at Saleor. Maybe we will do some example with Svelte. We'll see how it goes. But our focus is on React because, first of all, it's one of the most popular solutions right now. And we also think about our clients, so people who will eventually use that. So they have a technology which is widely adopted. And I think Svelte at some point will be also widely adopted, but we are not there yet. So that was
There are very exciting things coming to the React, like suspense components.
And that's true, yeah, exactly. We are almost, I think we are over time, but could we take one more question maybe from Ramsey? Are you planning to support subscription-based payment out of the box in the near future? Are we planning, or we don't know yet? Okay, so we
are planning for sure. That's frequently asked feature, and we are looking how we can meet the needs of many users, because subscriptions are quite complicated thing, and a lot of users have different ideas how it should work like.
Exactly. Okay, I think that's all. There's also a thank you note for you, Christoph.
I see that earlier and it smiled. Thank you.
So let's maybe stop here. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me today for this little stream. Thank you, the audience, for being with us, watching the stream. And we will do another update at the beginning of the next year. So if you have any questions you would like to ask us or topics we should cover, let us know and we will cover them. So I think that's all. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye.
See you.
Bye.